Did you know that in the medieval world, getting engaged was less about a quiet dinner and more about a jaw-dropping spectacle that could involve political intrigue, dazzling banquets, and even literal battles of wits? Were you aware that from the 1100s to the 1400s, some betrothal ceremonies were so grand they bankrupted entire noble houses or sealed alliances that changed the course of kingdoms? Number 9. The betrothal of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Louis VII of France. The air in Bordeaux crackled with an energy that felt almost religious, even though the occasion was decidedly political. It was the year 1137, and the mighty William X, Duke of Aquitaine, lay dead. His will, a document that rippled through the courts of Europe, declared his 15-year-old daughter, Eleanor, his sole heir. And not just any heir. She was the heiress to the largest and richest duchy in all of France, a territory larger than the King of France's own domain. This made her the most sought-after bride in the entire continent. But her father, in a move of strategic genius or perhaps desperate foresight, had already arranged her betrothal before his untimely death. His choice, Louis, the young heir apparent to the French throne. The news of William X's death had barely settled before a small, urgent party arrived from Paris. It was Abbot Suger, the king's chief advisor, a man known for his sharp mind and unwavering loyalty. He had ridden fast and hard, understanding the immense prize at stake. His mission was clear: secure Eleanor and her vast lands for the Capetian crown. The urgency was palpable. Other powerful lords, especially those from the Holy Roman Empire and England, would be keen to claim Aquitaine for themselves. The betrothal had to happen, and it had to happen fast, before any rival claimants could even send their messengers. The ceremony itself was not just a formality. It was a desperate gamble against time and political machinations. It took place in the grand cathedral of Saint-André in Bordeaux, a building already centuries old, its stone walls echoing with history. Outside, the sun was a bright disk in the summer sky, but inside, the light filtered through stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned patterns across the ancient flagstones. The scent of frankincense mingled with the damp smell of old stone and the faint sweet perfume of the gathered nobility. Eleanor, barely out of girlhood, stood surprisingly composed. She wore a simple, yet elegant gown of deep blue silk, a color that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her hair, famously golden, was unbound, a symbol of her unmarried status, though it would soon be bound by a queen's circlet. Her eyes, described by a visiting chronicler as bright as a summer sky, held a mixture of youthful curiosity and perhaps a flicker of apprehension. She was inheriting a duchy, not a dollhouse. By her side stood Abbot Suger, representing the absent young Louis, who was still journeying south, his pace accelerated by the frantic messages from Suger. The ceremony began with a solemn mass led by the Archbishop of Bordeaux himself. Chanting of the choir filled the vast space, the Latin words resonating with centuries of tradition. Every prayer, every blessing was aimed at solidifying this union, not just between two people, but between two immense territories. The legal documents, written on vellum thick as hide and sealed with impressive wax seals, were presented next. These weren't merely love letters, they were treaties. They meticulously laid out the terms of the inheritance, the rights of Eleanor as Duchess, and the implications of Aquitaine becoming a part of the French royal domain. The reading of these documents, long and dry, was punctuated by the rustle of robes and the hushed whispers of the assembled lords, all eager to hear every detail. The crucial moment arrived with the exchange of rings. Since Louis was not present, Abbot Suger acted as his proxy. He presented a ring of simple, unadorned gold, set with a single, perfectly cut sapphire, a stone associated with royalty and divine favor. The ring, small as it was, felt heavy with the weight of nations. As Suger, speaking on behalf of Louis, slipped the ring onto Eleanor's finger. The silence in the cathedral was absolute. It was a silent vow, a handshake across hundreds of miles, binding the future Queen of France to a future king she had never met. The Archbishop then blessed the union, his voice booming through the nave, declaring the betrothal formally ratified in the eyes of God and man. Following the church ceremony, a small but opulent feast was held in the ducal palace. The rushed nature of the betrothal meant that the usual weeks of preparation for such a grand event were impossible. Yet, the Aquitaine court, renowned for its sophistication and wealth, still managed to produce a stunning display. Roasted wild boar, spiced pigeons, and fresh river fish were served on silver platters, accompanied by barrels of the finest local wine. Musicians played lutes and harps, their melodies weaving through the excited chatter. The atmosphere was one of triumphant relief. The danger of losing Aquitaine to a rival power had been averted, at least for now. Eleanor, though still young, was now a figure of immense political importance. Her betrothal, secured so quickly, was a testament to the urgency of medieval diplomacy and the vast power wielded by female heiresses. It wasn't a romantic fairy tale. It was a cold, hard political maneuver dressed in the finery of a religious ceremony and celebrated with the joy of a strategic victory. The future of France, and indeed much of Europe, had been irrevocably altered on that bright summer day in Bordeaux. The young girl, now betrothed, was on the path to becoming one of the most powerful and intriguing women in all of history. Her journey had only just begun. Number 8. The betrothal of Richard the Lionheart and Berengaria of Navarre. The year was 1191. The Third Crusade was raging, and its most famous leader, Richard Plantagenet, King of England, was making his way towards the Holy Land. But even in the midst of fierce religious warfare, the matters of the heart, or more accurately the matters of alliance and succession, could not be ignored. Richard was still unmarried, a scandalous state for a king, especially one who needed an heir to secure his vast domains. His mother, the formidable Eleanor of Aquitaine, had taken it upon herself to remedy this situation. She had found a suitable match in Berengaria, the eldest daughter of Sancho VI of Navarre, a kingdom strategically located in the Pyrenees. The journey to meet his betrothed was not a leisurely trip. Richard was already en route to the Holy Land, battling storms and political adversaries. Eleanor, ever the master strategist, sailed from Naples, bringing Berengaria with her. The meeting point was Messina, Sicily, a bustling port city teeming with crusaders, merchants, and adventurers. Port was a chaotic symphony of creaking masts, flapping sails, and the shouts of sailors in a dozen different languages. The air smelled of salt fish and exotic spices. The formal betrothal ceremony itself, while grand, was somewhat overshadowed by the urgency of the crusade. It took place not in a grand cathedral in England or Navarre, but in a small chapel attached to the royal residence in Messina. A practical decision given the circumstances. Richard, known for his imposing stature and fiery temperament, strode into the chapel, clad not in royal robes but in traveling clothes, perhaps still smelling faintly of the sea. His hair, often described as reddish gold, was likely windswept. He cut a striking figure, a warrior king about to undertake a personal yet deeply political endeavor. Berengaria, a princess raised in the relatively secluded Pyrenean court, was likely nervous. She was described as more sensible than beautiful, a pragmatic compliment that understated her quiet grace and strength. She arrived accompanied by Eleanor of Aquitaine, who, even in her 70s, exuded an aura of indomitable will. Berengaria wore a gown of rich, dark velvet, perhaps a practical choice for travel rather than pure ceremony, but its depth of color spoke of her royal status. Her dark hair was neatly braided and her eyes, dark and intelligent, observed the formidable English king. The betrothal ritual itself was brief but weighty. It was officiated by the Archbishop of Messina, a local prelate, likely overwhelmed by the royal company. The vows were exchanged in Latin, a common tongue for medieval elites, though perhaps requiring translation for some of the Navarrese contingent. Richard, ever a man of action, spoke his vows with directness, his voice resonating with authority. Berengaria, though quieter, delivered her promises with a clear, steady voice, signaling a resolve that would prove useful in her future role as queen. The ring, a simple gold band, inscribed with a Latin blessing, was placed on Berengaria's finger by Richard himself. This personal touch, rather than relying on a proxy, added a layer of intimacy to what was fundamentally a political arrangement. It was a tangible promise, a physical representation of the alliance being forged between England and Navarre, a pact that could provide crucial resources and support for Richard's ongoing military campaigns. The witnesses were a collection of key figures. Eleanor of Aquitaine, her strategic gaze missing nothing, leading English barons eager to see their king secure an heir, and Navarrese envoys ensuring their princess was properly honored. Following the ceremony, a modest, by royal standards, feast was held. Modest perhaps, but still a spectacle. The hall was adorned with tapestries, depicting scenes of chivalry and hunting. Dishes of roasted fowl, fresh seafood from the Mediterranean, and spiced wines flowed freely. Conversation was a blend of political strategy for the crusade and polite inquiries about the Navarrese court. Richard, ever the warrior, would have likely spent much of the time discussing military plans with his commanders, while Eleanor ensured Berengaria felt welcomed, her keen political mind assessing the new addition to the Plantagenet dynasty. Entertainment was provided by local musicians, their melodies a mix of Arabic and European influences, reflecting Messina's Maildale character. Jugglers and storytellers performed, adding a touch of lightness to the otherwise serious proceedings. Despite the festivities, the shadow of the crusade loomed large. Richard would depart soon after, leaving Berengaria to follow with Eleanor on a separate ship. Their formal marriage would take place in Cyprus a few months later, marking another crucial step in their intertwined destinies. The betrothal in Messina was less about romantic grandiosity and more about efficient strategic alliances, a testament to the practicalities of medieval kingship amidst global conflict. It was a union born of necessity, sealed in a bustling port, and destined to play its part in the grand tapestry of the Crusades. Number 7. The betrothal of Isabella of France and Edward II of England. The year was 1303, and the stage was set for a monumental political chess match between England and France. King Edward I of England, known as the Hammer of the Scots, was a formidable figure. But his relationship with King Philip IV of France, the Fair, had been a tumultuous one. Years of conflict over Gascony and the French crown's increasing power had left deep scars. A marriage alliance was proposed as the ultimate peace treaty, a way to stitch together the torn fabric of their kingdoms. The chosen bride was Isabella, daughter of Philip IV, a princess who would become known as the She-Wolf of France, a figure of immense power and eventually tragic legend. The groom was Edward, Prince of Wales, son of Edward I, and the future King of England. The betrothal ceremony was not a hurried affair, like some others. It was a deliberate, meticulously planned spectacle designed to convey immense wealth, power, and the solemnity of the new-found peace. It took place in the majestic setting of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, a structure that had been steadily rising in grandeur for over a century, its Gothic spires reaching for the heavens. The city itself buzzed with anticipation, its narrow, winding streets packed with curious citizens and visiting dignitaries. On the day of the ceremony, the entire royal court of France was in attendance, a kaleidoscope of rich colors and glittering jewels. King Philip IV, imposing and unyielding in his bearing, presided over the event, his reputation for cold calculation preceding him. Isabella, a child of barely 7 years old, was dressed in a gown of shimmering gold brocade, its weight likely substantial for her small frame. Her fair hair was adorned with a delicate circlet of pearls, and her young face, though serious, held a hint of innocent wonder. She was escorted by her elder brothers, future kings in their own right, who seemed to dwarf her with their presence. Representing the English side was a delegation of the highest-ranking English nobles and bishops, led by the Earl of Lincoln, a seasoned diplomat. They had traveled from England bearing gifts of immense value and official documents sealed with the Great Seal of England. Edward, Prince of Wales, was not present in person. Such royal betrothals, especially of young children, were often conducted by proxy, a practice that underlined their political rather than personal nature. The distance and the delicate state of Anglo-French relations made personal attendance impractical. The ceremony itself was a lavish display of religious and political theater. The vast nave of Notre Dame was filled with the echoing chants of the choir, their voices rising to the vaulted ceilings. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax candles and the faint aroma of incense. The Archbishop of Paris, clad in resplendent robes, led the proceedings. The focus was on the solemn oaths exchanged on behalf of the young couple. The Earl of Lincoln, speaking for Prince Edward, swore the customary vows, pledging the prince's hand and future to Isabella. Isabella, prompted gently by her governess, repeated her own vows in a clear, surprisingly firm voice. Considering her age, the exchange of rings was a particularly poignant moment. The ring for Isabella, presented by the English delegation, was a masterpiece of English goldsmithery, a wide band of gold, intricately chased with heraldic lions and fleur-de-lis, symbolizing the union of the two royal houses, and set with a single, perfectly cut ruby, a stone of passion and power. As the small ring was placed on Isabella's tiny finger, it served as a visible, tangible symbol of the weighty alliance being forged. For a child, it must have seemed like a magnificent toy, yet it held the fate of nations. Following the sacred ceremony, a grand celebratory feast was held in the Palais de la Cité, the royal palace of Paris, a short distance from the cathedral. The great hall, adorned with magnificent tapestries depicting French victories and legends, was transformed into a scene of unparalleled opulence. Long tables groaned under the weight of an unimaginable array of dishes. Roasted peacocks, served with their feathers meticulously reattached, were paraded in by liveried servants. Wild game, spiced pastries, and exotic fruits were laid out alongside barrels of the finest French wines. The sound of lutes, flutes, and drums filled the hall, accompanying the lively conversation and laughter. Knights performed mock jousts in the palace courtyard, their armor gleaming under the late afternoon sun, their lances splintering with satisfying cracks. Bards recited epic poems, celebrating the lineage of both royal houses and prophesying a golden age of peace. The lavishness of the feast was not just about celebration. It was a clear demonstration of French royal power and wealth, a subtle message to the English delegation about the formidable ally they were securing. For Isabella, the betrothal marked the beginning of a life of unprecedented public scrutiny and political maneuvering. Though a child, she was now a pawn in a game of thrones, her future irrevocably tied to the fortunes of the English crown. Peace treaty, sealed with this betrothal, would prove fragile, and the path ahead for Isabella and Edward would be fraught with more drama than any medieval chronicler could have imagined. But on that day in Paris, surrounded by the splendor of two mighty kingdoms, hope and fragile peace seemed to reign supreme. Number 6. The betrothal of Blanche of Castile and Louis VIII of France. The year was 1200, a time when the powerful Capetian dynasty of France was eager to solidify its hold on the continent and expand its influence. King Philip II Augustus, a shrewd and ambitious monarch, sought to secure a strategic alliance with the powerful kingdom of Castile in Spain. His choice for a bride for his young son and heir, Louis, was Blanche, the granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and King Henry II of England. This particular lineage made Blanche a highly desirable, if complicated, match. Her grandmother Eleanor played a pivotal role in negotiating this union, traveling personally to Spain to secure the agreement. The journey of Blanche from Castile to France for her betrothal was an event in itself, a testament to the dangers and complexities of medieval travel. Blanche, barely 12 years old, embarked on a long and arduous journey across the Pyrenees, accompanied by her formidable grandmother Eleanor of Aquitaine, who had secured a safe passage from the powerful King of Navarre. The procession included a large retinue of Castilian nobles, a guard of knights, and a host of servants, all bearing gifts and necessary provisions for the long trek. Every stop along the way was an opportunity for local lords to witness the passing of a future queen, a moment of local pageantry. The formal betrothal ceremony took place at the border between Spain and France, on the river Betrothal. This location was chosen deliberately, a symbolic meeting point between two nations, emphasizing the diplomatic nature of the union. The setting was less a grand cathedral and more an open-air spectacle, surrounded by the natural beauty of the Pyrenean foothills. Temporary pavilions adorned with the heraldry of both France and Castile had been erected for the occasion, their colorful banners snapping in the mountain breeze. On the French side stood King Philip II Augustus, a man known for his astute political mind and military prowess. By his side was his young son, Louis, a boy of 13 years, shy and bookish in demeanor, but with a growing sense of his royal destiny. On the Spanish side, Eleanor of Aquitaine, a woman of legendary intelligence and resilience, presented her granddaughter, Blanche. Blanche, dressed in a gown of rich crimson velvet, embroidered with gold thread, looked every inch a princess. Her dark hair was intricately braided, and her face, framed by a delicate veil, showed a quiet dignity that belied her young age. The ceremony commenced with a solemn mass, celebrated by bishops from both France and Castile. Prayers were offered for the prosperity of the union, for peace between the kingdoms, and for the health of the young couple. The exchange of vows, delivered by proxies due to the youth of the participants, was a moment of deep solemnity. Proxy for Louis a Senior, French prelate, spoke with gravitas, pledging the future king's hand. Blanche, prompted by Eleanor, spoke her vows in a clear, unwavering voice, a testament to her noble upbringing and early understanding of her duty. The ring exchange was a key moment. The ring presented to Blanche was a magnificent piece of French royal jewelry, a wide band of intricately worked gold, set with a large, gleaming emerald, a stone associated with hope and fidelity. As the ring was placed on her finger, it symbolized not just a personal promise, but a binding treaty between two powerful houses. Detailed documents outlining the dowry Blanche brought, a vast sum of gold and jewels as well as claims to Gascony, were formally read aloud, underscoring the economic and territorial implications of the match. Chroniclers of the time noted the meticulous attention to detail in these legal agreements, each clause carefully considered to prevent future disputes. Following the formal declarations, a grand feast was held, transforming the border region into a vibrant hub of celebration. Elaborate temporary kitchens had been set up, producing an astonishing array of dishes. Roasted venison, stuffed swans, and spiced fish were served on wooden trenchers and pewter platters. Barrels of wine and ale were tapped, and the sound of clinking goblets and cheerful chatter filled the air. Musicians played lively tunes on lutes and bagpipes, their melodies mingling with the shouts of jesters and the appreciative murmurs of the assembled nobility. Knights from both sides participated in a series of friendly tournaments, their skills on horseback and with a lance sacred for the entertainment of the courts. The jousting, though not a real battle, was a display of martial prowess, an unspoken reassurance of the strength of the new allies. Minstrels sang ballads of heroic deeds and courtly love, their voices carrying across the festive grounds. For many present, it was a rare opportunity to witness such a grand, cross-cultural gathering. The betrothal of Blanche and Louis was more than just a formal agreement. It was a carefully orchestrated diplomatic coup that strengthened the French crown and marked a significant step in the long intertwined history of France and Spain. Blanche, despite her youth, would prove to be an exceptionally capable queen and regent, guiding her son, Louis IX, to sainthood and a golden age for France. Her betrothal at the river, a moment of high theater and political genius, set her on the path to becoming one of the most influential women of the medieval era. It was a union born of ambition and strategy, sealed with promises and celebration. Number 5. The betrothal of Catherine of Aragon and Arthur, Prince of Wales. The year was 1489, and the Tudor dynasty in England, still relatively new and striving for international legitimacy, sought to solidify its position through a powerful marriage alliance. King Henry VII, the first Tudor monarch, turned his gaze to Spain, a burgeoning European superpower unified under the formidable Ferdinand and Isabella. Prize was their youngest daughter, Catherine of Aragon, a princess whose lineage stretched back to ancient Visigothic kings and was steeped in the glory of the Reconquista. The groom was Arthur, Prince of Wales, Henry VII's eldest son and heir, a boy destined, everyone believed, to become King of England. The betrothal ceremony, though conducted by proxy due to the young age of both children and the geographical distance, was a monumental affair designed to impress and assure. It took place in the royal palace of the Alcazar in Medina del Campo, Spain, a testament to the grandeur of the Catholic monarch's palace, with its Moutier architecture and vast courtyards, was already a symbol of Spanish power and artistic achievement. The setting was chosen to showcase the wealth and sophistication of the Spanish court. On the day of the ceremony, the entire court of Ferdinand and Isabella was assembled. The Spanish monarchs themselves, known for their piety and political acumen, presided over the event with a solemn dignity that bordered on awe-inspiring. Catherine, a child of 3 years old, was dressed in the finest Spanish court fashion, a heavy gown of crimson silk embroidered with gold thread and pearls, a miniature version of what a queen might wear. Her auburn hair, a distinctive feature of the Aragonese royal line, was carefully arranged, and her small face, though perhaps bemused, held an innate solemnity. She was too young to understand the immense weight of the ceremony, but she was already a living symbol of an alliance. Representing Prince Arthur was the English ambassador, Dr. Rodrigo de Puebla, a man of quiet determination and sharp intellect. He had traveled with a sizable retinue, bringing official documents signed by King Henry VII and an array of magnificent gifts for the Spanish court. These gifts included English silver plate, fine woolen cloth, and jewels, all intended to demonstrate the wealth and prestige of the English crown. The betrothal itself took place in the Grand Hall of the Alcazar. The hall was bedecked with tapestries depicting glorious Spanish victories and religious scenes, and the air was filled with the scent of beeswax candles and fresh flowers. A bishop specially dispatched by the Pope for the occasion officiated, lending the ceremony immense religious authority. The vows were exchanged in Latin, the universal language of the Church and diplomacy. Dr. de Puebla, speaking for Prince Arthur, solemnly pledged the prince's hand and future. Catherine, guided by her mother, Queen Isabella, performed the symbolic gesture of extending her hand, her small fingers touching the ambassador's gloved hand, sealing the vow. The ring exchange was a moment of particular symbolic importance. The ring presented for Catherine was truly magnificent, a substantial piece of English gold, crafted with the Tudor rose and the Welsh dragon, symbolizing Arthur's lineage, and set with a large, perfectly cut diamond, a stone of unbreakable strength and eternal love. As the ambassador carefully and gently, placed the ring on Catherine's tiny finger. It signified a binding promise, a political contract made sacred by religious ritual. This simple action tied the futures of two powerful European nations together. Detailed clauses of the marriage treaty, which included an enormous dowry and specifics of succession, were also read aloud, making clear the practicalities of the royal union. Following the sacred ceremony, a lavish feast was held in the palace's great hall, a true display of Spanish culinary and courtly magnificence. Long tables, covered with fine white linen, were laden with an astonishing variety of dishes. Whole roasted lambs, wild boar, and game birds were brought forth on silver platters. Intricately prepared marzipan sculptures depicting castles and heraldic beasts adorned the tables. The air was filled with the rich aromas of saffron, garlic, and citrus. Fine Spanish wines flowed freely from ornate decanters. Entertainment was provided by Moorish musicians, their melodies a haunting blend of Spanish and Arabic influences, reflecting the cultural richness of Spain. Flamenco dancers performed with vibrant energy, and troubadours sang epic ballads of Spanish heroes. The entire celebration was designed to be a grand diplomatic spectacle, cementing the alliance between England and Spain against their common rival France, and strengthening the Tudor claim to the English throne. For Catherine, this betrothal marked the beginning of a life lived on the international stage. She was a tool of diplomacy, her young life dedicated to the service of her parents' grand political designs. Though the union with Arthur was destined to be tragically short-lived, the seeds of her future, and indeed the future of England, were sown on that elaborate day in Medina del Campo. It was a union of kingdoms sealed in splendor. Number 4. The betrothal of Margaret of Anjou and Henry VI of England. The year was 1444, and England was embroiled in the tail end of the 100 Years' War, a conflict that had bled the kingdom dry and fractured its nobility. King Henry VI, a gentle and pious man, but increasingly considered weak and ineffectual by his own court, desperately needed a marriage that would secure peace and produce an heir. Choice fell upon Margaret of Anjou, niece of the powerful King Charles VII of France. This betrothal was not just a union of two people. It was meant to be a grand peace treaty, an attempt to end decades of bloody warfare between England and France. However, it came at a steep price. The English would give up the strategically important territory of Maine. The negotiations were fraught with tension. English envoys, led by the Earl of Suffolk, traveled to Tours in France, a city buzzing with diplomatic intrigue. The French court, sensing English desperation, drove a hard bargain. Margaret, a spirited and beautiful young woman of 14, was already a force to be reckoned with. Even at her young age, she had a strong will and a fiery intelligence, qualities that would later define her tumultuous life as Queen of England during the Wars of the Roses. The betrothal ceremony itself was a masterpiece of political theater, a rare moment of Anglo-French camaraderie before the storm. Took place in the Grand Tours Cathedral, a magnificent Gothic edifice with soaring arches and intricate stained glass. Cathedral was adorned with banners bearing the fleur-de-lis of France and, symbolically, the three lions of England, a visual representation of the hopeful peace. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the murmur of anticipation. King Charles VII of France, a pragmatic and battle-hardened monarch, presided over the ceremony, a proud uncle securing a powerful alliance for his niece. Margaret, radiant in a gown of white satin, embroidered with gold thread and jewels, entered the cathedral, accompanied by a glittering retinue of French nobility. Her dark hair was styled beneath a delicate circlet, and her eyes, described by contemporary chroniclers as sparkling with spirit, surveyed the assembly with a mix of awe and burgeoning confidence. Henry VI, The future groom was not present. English kings rarely traveled to France for betrothals, especially when negotiations were still so sensitive. The Earl of Suffolk stood as his proxy, a man who had staked his political career on this alliance. Suffolk was known for his elegant bearing and diplomatic skill, and he played his part with solemn grace. The ceremony began with a solemn high mass, sung by a full choir, their voices filling the vast space. The Bishop of Tours officiated, his vestments gleaming in the candlelight. The core of the ceremony was the formal exchange of vows. The Earl of Suffolk, speaking on behalf of King Henry VI, swore a solemn oath to take Margaret as his wife and future queen. Margaret, in turn, with a clear and unwavering voice, spoke her vows, her youthful conviction adding weight to the sacred promise. This public declaration was crucial, ensuring that the union was recognized by both kingdoms and the Church. The exchange of rings was a moment of profound symbolism. Suffolk presented a ring of English gold, famously large and ornate, set with a large, perfectly cut sapphire, a stone traditionally associated with royalty and divine favor. As he placed the ring on Margaret's finger, it was not merely a personal gift, it was a tangible representation of the peace treaty, a symbol of the immense hopes riding on this alliance. The full terms of the treaty, including the contentious cession of Maine, were formally read aloud, making sure all present understood the concessions made for this peace. Following the religious ceremony, a truly magnificent feast was held in the royal palace at Tours, a short distance from the cathedral. The palace's great hall was transformed into a vision of medieval luxury. Tables groaned under the weight of an unbelievable array of dishes: roasted swan, stuffed capons, venison pasties, and elaborate subtleties, intricately molded sugar sculptures, depicting castles and heraldic scenes. The finest French wines flowed from intricately carved wooden barrels. The hall resonated with the sounds of trumpets, lutes, and pipes, as minstrels and jesters entertained the assembled nobles. The festivities included a series of courtly dances, with French and English lords and ladies taking to the floor, a rare display of harmony. Outside, the sounds of celebratory cannon fire echoed across the Loire River. The atmosphere was one of carefully constructed joy and optimism, a brief respite from the decades of war. For Margaret, this day marked the beginning of her journey to a new foreign land, where she would become queen of a kingdom teetering on the brink of civil war. Her betrothal, hailed as a harbinger of peace, would ironically become a prelude to the devastating Wars of the Roses, a conflict in which she would fight fiercely for her husband's crown and her son's inheritance. But on that day in Tours, surrounded by the splendor of two great courts, the future seemed bright, full of the promise of a lasting peace. Number 3. The betrothal of Joan of Navarre and Henry IV of England. The year was 1402, and England was navigating the treacherous waters of a newly established dynasty. Henry IV, having seized the throne from Richard II, needed to legitimize his rule and secure international recognition. He was also a widower with several adult children, and the succession, though ostensibly settled, needed further bolstering. His choice for a second marriage was Joan of Navarre, Duchess of Brittany, a wealthy and politically astute widow with several children of her own. This was no youthful, innocent betrothal. It was a mature, strategic alliance between two powerful, experienced individuals. The negotiations were lengthy and complex. Joan was a formidable figure, having governed Brittany for years after her first husband's death. She insisted on retaining her full ducal rights and the guardianship of her children, a testament to her independent spirit. Henry, for his part, was a king still consolidating his power, dealing with rebellions and a restless nobility. The betrothal, therefore, was a carefully crafted political agreement, designed to bring stability and prestige to both sides. The formal betrothal ceremony was held by proxy, as was common for international royal marriages, especially when both parties were experienced rulers with prior commitments. It took place in Eltham Palace, just outside London, a favorite residence of Henry IV, and a place known for its magnificent Great Hall. The palace, with its sprawling grounds and stately buildings, projected an image of royal power and tradition. The day was crisp, a typical English autumn day, with faint wisps of smoke curling from the chimneys. On the day of the ceremony, the Great Hall of Eltham Palace was a hive of activity. It was richly decorated with tapestries depicting scenes of English history and chivalry, and the floor was strewn with fresh rushes and aromatic herbs. King Henry IV, a robust and imposing figure, presided over the event. He wore robes of deep crimson velvet, trimmed with ermine and a circlet of gold on his head. His expression was one of quiet triumph, knowing that this alliance would significantly enhance his standing among European monarchs. Representing Joan of Navarre was her chief envoy, Robert, Bishop of Lyon, accompanied by a retinue of Breton and Navarrese nobles. They had traveled across the English Channel, bearing not only the legal documents, but also magnificent gifts from Joan for her future husband and the English court. These gifts included a fine collection of Breton tapestries, intricately worked jewelry, and exotic spices, all potting the wealth of Brittany and Navarre. The ceremony itself was a blend of legal formality and religious sanctity. It began with a solemn mass, celebrated by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the highest ecclesiastic in England. His vestments were dazzling, and his voice boomed as he invoked divine blessing upon the union. The heart of the ceremony was the formal exchange of vows. The Bishop of Lyon, speaking on behalf of Joan, solemnly pledged her hand and future. Henry IV, in turn, spoke his own vows directly, his voice strong and clear, signaling his personal commitment to the alliance. This direct participation, even in a proxy betrothal, was unusual and conveyed a sense of mutual respect between the two seasoned rulers. The exchange of rings was a potent symbol. The Bishop of Lyon presented a ring from Joan for Henry, a heavy gold band, intricately carved with the emblem of Navarre and set with a large gleaming emerald, a stone associated with wisdom and new beginning. Henry, in turn, presented a ring for Joan, a ring of English gold, adorned with the English lion and French fleur-de-lis, symbolizing his dual claim to the French throne, and set with a magnificent ruby, a stone of power and love. As these rings were exchanged, handled by the proxies but intended for the principals, they solidified a deeply significant political and personal bond. The elaborate marriage contract, detailing the dowry and the terms of Joan's dower, was read aloud, its clauses meticulously dissected by the attending lawyers and nobles, ensuring full transparency. Following the sacred vows, a truly spectacular feast was held in the Great Hall. The tables were laden with an astonishing array of dishes. A true feast fit for a king. Roasted boars, stuffed swans with their feathers reattached, whole-baked fish, and a dizzying variety of meat pies and pastries were served. The finest English ale and French wines flowed freely from elaborate silver pitchers. The air was filled with the sounds of lively conversation, punctuated by the music of trumpets, shawms, and bagpipes. Entertainment was lavish. Minstrels performed ballads and heroic poems, some celebrating the prowess of Henry IV, others perhaps hinting at the long history of Navarre. Jugglers and acrobats performed dazzling feats, and jesters provided comic relief. The atmosphere was one of carefully cultivated jubilation, designed to send a clear message to rivals at home and abroad. Henry IV's position was strong, and his alliances were growing. For Joan, this betrothal marked a new chapter, a move from the independent governance of Brittany to the complex and often dangerous world of the English court. She would eventually travel to England and marry Henry in person, becoming queen. Her betrothal at Eltham Palace, a sophisticated and deliberate affair, reflected the realities of late medieval power politics where personal unions were inextricably linked to national destinies. It was a union not of naive romance, but of experienced statesmanship, sealed with ceremony and celebration. Number 2. The betrothal of Philippa of Hainault and Edward III of England. The year was 1326, a time of profound unrest and political turmoil in England. King Edward II, unpopular and weak, was under the sway of undesirable favorites, leading to widespread discontent among his nobility. His estranged wife, Queen Isabella of France, known as the She-Wolf, had fled to her brother's court in France and was plotting her return, determined to depose her husband and place their young son Edward on the throne. To secure the necessary military support for her audacious plan, Isabella needed a powerful ally. Her choice fell upon Willem, the first Count of Hainault, a strategically located territory in the Low Countries. Price for his support was the betrothal of his daughter Philippa to Isabella's son, the young Prince Edward. Pre-betrothal negotiations were a delicate dance of diplomacy and covert intrigue. Queen Isabella, leveraging her considerable charm and political acumen, successfully persuaded Willem I, but before the formal agreement, a crucial and rather charming medieval custom was enacted: a detailed physical inspection of the prospective bride. Bishop Adam Orleton, a trusted English envoy, was dispatched to Hainault with strict instructions from Isabella. His task was to thoroughly evaluate Philippa, reporting back on her appearance, demeanor, and suitability as a future queen. His report, preserved in historical records, detailed her comely appearance, her intelligence, and her pleasant nature, reassuring Isabella that she had chosen well. The formal betrothal ceremony itself, conducted by proxy due to the turbulent political climate in England and the logistical challenges of royal travel, was held in Valenciennes, a prominent city in Hainault. The setting was the magnificent church of Saint Nicholas, a grand stone edifice that had stood for centuries, its ancient walls bearing witness to countless solemn vows. The city was abuzz with anticipation, its streets lined with curious onlookers, eager to glimpse the English envoys and the princess who would one day be Queen of England. On the day of the ceremony, the church was adorned with the vibrant banners of Hainault and symbolically the English royal standard, a visual declaration of the alliance being forged. Count Willem I, a powerful and pragmatic ruler, presided with an air of satisfaction, knowing he had secured a formidable future for his daughter and a significant political advantage for his house. Philippa, a young girl of 14 years, was dressed in a gown of rich, shimmering blue silk, a color that brought out the brightness of her eyes. Her light brown hair was adorned with a delicate coronet of pearls, and her expression was one of quiet dignity, perhaps mingled with a touch of youthful excitement at the enormity of the occasion. Representing the young Prince Edward was a senior English knight, Sir Walter Manny, a man renowned for his chivalry and military prowess, symbolizing the martial strength of the English crown. He had arrived with a considerable retinue, bearing the official documents of betrothal and a selection of magnificent gifts from Queen Isabella for Philippa and her family. These gifts included English jewels, fine cloths, and exquisite works of art, all meant to convey the wealth and prestige of the English royal house. The ceremony began with a solemn mass celebrated by the Bishop of Cambrai, a prominent ecclesiastic of the region. Choirs' voices filled the vast space, their hymns resonating with centuries of tradition. The core of the ceremony was the formal exchange of vows. Sir Walter Manny, speaking on behalf of Prince Edward, swore a solemn oath to take Philippa as his future wife and queen. Philippa, with a clear and steady voice, spoke her own vows, her youthful conviction adding gravity to the sacred promise. This public declaration was crucial, establishing the legitimacy of the union in the eyes of both God and man. The exchange of rings was a symbolic and touching moment. Sir Walter Manny presented a ring from Prince Edward for Philippa, a simple yet elegant gold band, set with a single perfectly cut sapphire, a stone associated with loyalty and wisdom. As he placed the ring on Philippa's finger, it was not merely a personal gift, it was a tangible symbol of the immense political alliance, a visible promise that would bind their two houses together. The detailed marriage treaty, outlining the terms of Philippa's dowry and the military assistance Hainaut would provide for Isabella's invasion of England, was formally read aloud, its clauses meticulously considered by the attending nobles. Following the sacred vows, a grand celebratory feast was held in the Count of Hainaut's palace in Valenciennes, a short walk from the church. The great hall was transformed into a scene of opulence and festivity. Long tables groaned under the weight of an incredible array of dishes, roasted meats of every kind, including whole boars and deer, elaborate fish dishes, and an abundance of spiced pastries and sweet delicacies. The finest local wines flowed freely from intricately carved wooden barrels. The air was filled with the sounds of lively conversation, punctuated by the vibrant music of lutes, flutes, and drums. Entertainment was plentiful. Minstrels sang heroic ballads, jesters performed their antics, and troops of acrobats dazzled the guests with their skills. The highlight was a series of mock tournaments held in the palace courtyard, where knights from Hainaut and England competed in friendly contests, displaying their prowess and camaraderie, a visible sign of the new alliance. For Philippa, this day marked the beginning of her journey to a new kingdom, where she would eventually become one of England's most beloved and respected queens, mother to a large family, and a key figure in her husband's long and successful reign. Her betrothal at Valenciennes, sealed amidst political intrigue and military preparations, set her on the path to becoming a pivotal figure in English history. Number 1. The betrothal of Mary, Queen of Scots, and Francis, Dauphin of France. The year was 1548, and Scotland was in a precarious position. Infant Queen Mary, born just 6 days before her father's death, was the most sought-after bride in Europe. England, under the aggressive Protestant rule of Edward VI's regents, was pressing for a marriage to their young king, a union that would effectively absorb Scotland into England. To counter this threat, Mary's mother, Mary of Guise, a powerful and astute French noblewoman, sought a closer alliance with her native France. The solution was the rough wooing, a period of brutal Anglo-Scottish conflict, followed by a dramatic agreement. Mary, Queen of Scots, would be betrothed to Francis, the Dauphin of France, heir to the French throne. This meant sending the 5-year-old queen to France for her safety and upbringing. The journey itself was a dramatic affair. Mary, accompanied by her 4 Marys, 4 young noble girls of similar age who would serve as her companions and ladies-in-waiting, and a formidable retinue of Scottish and French guards, secretly boarded a French galley at Dumbarton Castle. They sailed through stormy seas, narrowly avoiding English warships, a perilous voyage that underscored the immense stakes involved. After a 2-week journey, they landed in Roscoff, Brittany, and then proceeded in triumph through France, a royal procession making its way towards the French court. The formal betrothal ceremony, though between 2 children, was a spectacle of immense political and religious significance, designed to be a definitive statement of the Franco-Scottish alliance. It took place in the Grand Hall of the Château de Saint-Germain-en-Laye, a favored royal residence just outside Paris, a testament to the grandeur and power of the Valois monarchy. The château, with its sprawling grounds and Renaissance architecture, provided a magnificent backdrop for the event. The French court was known for its extravagance and sophistication, and this occasion was no exception. On the day of the ceremony, the great hall of the château was a dazzling display of opulence. It was adorned with magnificent tapestries, depicting scenes of French glory and allegorical figures, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers and exotic perfumes. King Henry II of France, a commanding figure, presided over the event with his wife, Queen Catherine de' Medici, a formidable woman known for her keen political mind. Francis the Dauphin, a delicate and somewhat sickly child of 4 years old, was dressed in the finest French court fashion, a miniature version of a king's robes, made of cloth of gold and velvet, heavily embroidered with the French fleur-de-lis. His young face, though serious, held a hint of bewilderment at the grandeur surrounding him. By his side stood Mary, Queen of Scots, an ethereal figure even at her tender age. She wore a gown of rich Scottish tartan silk, specially commissioned for the occasion, its vibrant colors a nod to her distant homeland. Her flaming red hair, already her signature feature, was adorned with a delicate coronet of pearls, and her bright eyes observed the French court with a mixture of childlike wonder and innate regality. The ceremony itself was a solemn and elaborate affair. Overseen by a cardinal, the highest ecclesiastical authority present, it began with a solemn mass, sung by a full choir, their voices rising to the vaulted ceilings of the hall. The core of the ceremony was the formal exchange of vows. Cardinal, acting as proxy for both children, spoke the vows in Latin, binding the two young royals. This was not a personal promise, but a dynastic declaration. Each child, prompted gently by their attendants, extended a small hand, symbolically accepting the future spouse. This formal public acceptance was crucial for legal and political validity. The exchange of rings was a moment of profound symbolism. A magnificent ring crafted in Paris was presented for Mary, a wide band of gold, intricately chased with both the French fleur-de-lis and the Scottish lion rampant, symbolizing the inseparable union of the two kingdoms. It was set with a large, perfectly cut diamond, representing the strength and permanence of the alliance. As the cardinal placed the ring on Mary's tiny finger, it was not merely a personal gift, it was a tangible symbol of the old alliance between Scotland and France, now solidified by a future dynastic union. Precise terms of the marriage treaty, which included the controversial clause that Scotland would revert to France should Mary die childless, were meticulously read aloud, though likely lost on the young participants. Following the sacred vows, a truly spectacular feast was held, a display of French culinary and artistic brilliance. Tables covered with fine damask linen groaned under the weight of an unbelievable array of dishes. Roasted game, elaborate pates, exotic fruits, and exquisitely detailed entremets, edible sculptures depicting historical events and mythical creatures. The finest French wines flowed freely from intricately carved carafes. The hall resonated with the sounds of trumpets, lutes, and harps. As the royal orchestra played lively tunes, entertainment was lavish and continuous. Court jesters performed their antics, and a troupe of acrobats amazed the guests with their daring feats. The highlight was a grand masquerade ball, where courtiers dressed in fantastical costumes, adding to the atmosphere of joyous celebration. The entire celebration was designed to be a grand diplomatic spectacle, cementing the alliance between France and Scotland against the Protestant English, and to demonstrate the immense wealth and power of the Valois dynasty. For Mary, this betrothal marked the beginning of her extraordinary and ultimately tragic life within the French court. She would grow up there deeply immersed in French culture before her eventual return to Scotland and her fateful encounter with the English throne. This elaborate betrothal, sealed in the grandeur of a French chateau, set the stage for one of history's most compelling and ill-fated queens.